Today I'm going to be talking about the Doppler phases. It's something kind of important to know for pricing these knives because not every Doppler knife is created equal, and it's kind of interesting because this is like the only knife finish that actually has different finish catalog while still technically being considered the same knife. By like the Steam market, we'll all consider them all the same knife, but they will actually have completely different basically paint kits used to make these knives. As you can see, this Doppler Phase 1 is finish catalog 418, and then you've got like 419 Phase 2, 420, 421, and then I don't remember. I think the rubies, sapphires, black pearls, I think that's like 415, 16, 17, so I think that actually is before the other ones. But so anyways, let's get into this. So Doppler knives are probably the single highest demand knife finish in all of CSGO, but not all Dopplers are created equal. Doppler knives are created by applying this picture here of smoke to the knife with a random orientation and offset, and then the red, green, and blue portions are then they're then colored by the game depending on the phase of the knife. So to tell the phases apart, you can memorize the pattern indexes like I mentioned before, but it's easy to learn how they all look visually, basically, because some knives, like off the top of my head, I know the Talon knife does this actually. It uses a completely different pattern indexes, so you'd have to remember it's 14 total patterns for Doppler, and then all the Gamma Doppler ones, which is just a lot of work, and it's easier just to know what they look like visually, basically. So I like to call phase 1 and 2 the ruby family, and phase 3 and 4 the sapphire family, because you know, phase 1 and 2 they have like the reds and the pink, and 3s and 4s the blues. So phase 1 knives have one section of the smoke recolored to be like this pink color right here. As you can see, that's about 1/3 of the knife is recolored pink, while the rest remains kind of like that dark blue, that deep, I don't know, like midnight color. And then if we take a look at a phase 2, as you can see on this example of a phase 2 knife, 2 of those colors of smoke, I'm not sure which 2 sections it actually is, but 2 of them are recolored to be this pink reddish color. So if you see a mostly blue knife with some bright purple, you're looking at a phase 1. If you see a mostly purple knife with some blue, you're looking at a phase 2. And the reason I chose the Bowie knife for my examples here is because this is actually, the handle here is painted the same way the solid color finishes work, where it just takes one of the colors that's used to paint the knives and puts it on the handle without any mixing or anything. And so, as you can see, it's got this kind of reddish brown for the phase 2. The phase 1 has that that pink color for the handle. So like if the section here that's colored pink, let's pretend that I don't know if this is true or not, but let's pretend like that's the red section of the painting that's getting colored, so the red becomes pink and the rest becomes blue. And then the handle is also colored using the red section, so the handle becomes pink. And then similarly for the Doppler phase 2, let's say that the green and the blue sections are the ones colored pink instead of the red, and then the red section stays that like deep color, that blue color. And so that's why you've got this dark handle color. You can kind of see this with the shadow daggers. The handles are painted the same way, and you can see the handles are that solid color, that like purplish galaxy color that you see on the phase 2, where on the phase 1 that would be a bright pink. So there's the phase 1s with the bright pink handles. So basically, just remember the easiest way to tell is either to learn pink handle is definitely phase 1, purple handle is phase 2, mostly blue blade with a little pink is phase 1, mostly pink blade with a little blue. Phase 3 and 4 follow a similar pattern, but instead of pink, the color that's being replaced, it's blue. So phase 3 has one section of smoke recolored blue, and then the other actually has a little bit of green in there. So the handles of phase 3 knives that have the specially colored handles are actually going to be green. So if you see any green at all, and it's a regular Doppler, not a gamma Doppler, you know you're looking at a phase 3. And then phase 4s are pretty easy to tell apart because whether you're looking at the handle or the blade, they're going to be very blue. So mostly blue with a little bit of dark, no green at all, that's a phase 4 you're looking at. Again, just to take another look at the shadow daggers here, you can see they have the green handle as well with a little bit of blue and a little bit of green on the blade. And then for the Doppler shadow daggers here, these are the phase 4, very blue all around. Phase 4 is kind of like the false sapphire. This one is very easy to tell. It's the ruby. It's extremely red. It doesn't really look like any of the Dopplers, so it's really hard to get confused with a different knife. Red, ruby, pretty easy to understand. Sapphire, I guess it's possible to get it confused with the phase 2, but the sapphire has a much more blue blade. It's all painted using kind of a dark blue color, so when it gets mixed together, it kind of adds the values of how much blue it needs, and all those colors kind of overlay on each other, so it ends up being very bright blue. That's why you can see on the handle is actually not as bright blue as the phase 4. It's actually a pretty dark blue color. Here you can see what I'm talking about with the shadow daggers. The handles are actually very dark, but the blade is very bright blue sapphire. This one's pretty easy to learn what it looks like. Just don't get tricked into someone saying that a phase 4 is a sapphire, because it's not worth nearly as much. Sapphires are very, very expensive. And probably the single most expensive phase of any normal Doppler knife. And this is the rarest of any Doppler knife at all. I believe it's about twice as rare as a sapphire or a ruby. But this is the black pearl Doppler knife. The black pearl often can get confused with a kind of like a bad pattern of a phase 1 that's very dark. But the trick is to look at the handle. If you have one of these knives like the Bowie or the shadow daggers where the handle gets the solid color, and I believe this is also the grips of the butterfly knife work the same way. Remember, phase 1s have bright pink, so if you see any bright pink at all on the knife, you are not looking at a black pearl, you are looking at a phase 1. So if any of the smoke on the knife is bright pink, you can kind of see that this one has purple, but that's within the bounds, it's still dark enough. And on black pearls, you might also see some of this like cyan color. You can see it in the middle of the blade, so cyan, blue, purple, and sometimes even a little greenish color. Here I've pulled up a phase 1 butterfly knife. You can kind of see it's very dark, and the pink that's supposed to be bright is actually really dark on the butterfly knife. That's just kind of how all butterfly knives are. They're very dark on the blades. And so if you look at it there, it might look a bit like a black pearl. I wish this guy would just stay still. But the trick is the grips on the handle, and just knowing that butterfly knives are a bit darker. This is obviously a phase 1 you're looking at, not a black pearl. And I think it's a lot easier once you've seen the black pearl. You see the handles are blue. It's all dark colors. You can see the cyan, you can see the green towards the top there. And this is much more rare than the phase 1. This here is a phase 1 gamma Doppler. you can think of this as being very similar to the phase 1 of the regular Doppler, but instead of pink, you've got green. So the handle becomes green, and one of those smoke clouds becomes a nice, pretty bright green color. And the rest is the same shade of blue as the phase 1 regular Doppler knife. So very similar to the normal Doppler. The phase 2 is a little tricky. In terms of value, it tends to be the most expensive of the non-gem phases. It's got 2 of those smoke clouds bright colored to green, and then the rest of the knife where that smoke isn't is also still a dark green. So this knife is kind of like the false emerald. As you can see, the handle becomes a dark green, it all becomes a dark green, it mixes together and makes some bright green. Green all around, no other colors. That's the phase 2. Now the phase 3 and the phase 4 are actually pretty similar, but there's definitely a trick to telling them apart. So the phase 3 and the 4 are the gamma Dopplers that have this cyan color on them. So they've got that like light blue green kind of, yeah. But the trick to tell a phase 3 apart from phase 4 is to look at the green. On the phase 3, you've got kind of this like dark forest green. On the phase 4, you get this really bright lime green color, which I think looks really nice, especially on the newer knives. It's done very well. The emerald is just green as can be, a lot brighter than the phase 2. And then the handle will be a pretty dark color. And that's just because the way that the Source Engine handles the anodized multicolored finish. So combines 3 dark greens, adds the values, makes bright green all around. Looks very nice. Alright, I pulled up a random phase of a Doppler knife. I want you to just guess in your head what this is. And I chose stiletto because it's tricky on purpose. Here's the other side. Alright, now I'm going to tell you what phase this is and how I can tell. So here's what I'm looking at. Alright, the blue and the black on the knife tells us that it's either a phase 3 or a 4. But the green on the tip here and on the other side towards the top tells us that this is a phase 3 Doppler knife. Alright, we can tell this knife is part of the ruby family because it's got this pinkish reddish color on it and not a lot of those bright pure blues. So we know this is either a phase 1 or a 2. And the fact that it's more bright pink than this dark purple tells us that this is a phase 2 because it's got no bright pink, no bright blue, none of that. So what I would be thinking in my head right now is this is either a phase 1, a phase 3, or a black pearl. And if we look at the other side of the knife, we see it's a little bluer, but there's really no bright pink anywhere. There's no bright blue anywhere. And so that tells us that we're looking at black pearl right here. And as you can see, it does have that green at the top that I've said that some black pearl knives have. And it's fish catalog 417, which is black. The first thing you should notice is the cyan on the blade. The cyan on the blade tells us this is a phase 3 or a phase 4. And if we look at this green color here, you should ignore the handles because that could be pretty misleading. This green color here is the darker forest green, so this is a phase 3 knife that we're looking at. Alright, the first thing you should notice about this knife is that it doesn't matter because it's out of your price range.